I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, in a house where dreams had rules. Boys were allowed to dream big. Girls were supposed to dream small. My two older brothers were encouraged to play sports, think about careers, and talk about college plans. But for me, the message was different. I was told to learn how to cook, clean, and prepare myself to be a wife. My father didn't just discourage my ambitions, he mocked them. College is for men. Women belong in the home, he would say, sometimes with a sneer, sometimes with a laugh that made my stomach twist. But I loved school. I loved the way a book could open up a new world, the way solving a math problem felt like unlocking a secret, the way teachers told me I had potential. My mother quietly supported me, slipping me extra time to study when my chores were finished, whispering encouragement when my father wasn't around. She wasn't strong enough then to stand up to him, but her little gestures were lifelines. By the time I reached high school, I knew I wanted more. I wanted a life outside the suffocating walls of our house. I wanted to be the first woman in my family to go to college. Every report card I brought home was like a silent rebellion, each A a small act of defiance. My father would glance at them with disinterest, then toss them aside. My mother, though, would later fold those same papers neatly and tuck them into a drawer like precious treasures. Junior year, I started applying for scholarships in secret. I used the school library computers because my father had installed monitoring software on the family laptop. I worked with my guidance counselor, Mrs. Jensen, who became not only my mentor, but also my shield. She knew my situation. She knew my father wouldn't approve, and she quietly guided me through the maze of applications. When senior year came, I poured every ounce of myself into one particular scholarship. It was a full ride to a respected university 2 hours away. The essay prompt asked me about my biggest challenge. I wrote about growing up in a home where dreams were forbidden, about finding light in books when the world around me was dark. I wrote like my life depended on it, because it did. The night of the scholarship ceremony, I wore the only nice dress I owned. My mother ironed it carefully while my father sat in the living room, arms crossed, muttering about how it was a waste of time. When my name was announced, the whole gym erupted. I felt like I was floating, my heart beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. My teachers hugged me. My classmates cheered. But when I found my father's face in the crowd, it was like ice water poured over me. He wasn't happy. He wasn't proud. He was furious. That night, the celebration turned into silence. On the drive home, he didn't say a word. When we got back, he went straight to his room and slammed the door. My mother squeezed my hand, whispering, "I'm proud of you," her eyes glistening with tears she didn't want him to see. The next morning, I discovered my birth certificate and social security card were missing from the family safe. I knew instantly what had happened. He had taken them. Without those documents, I couldn't register for housing or complete my enrollment. I confronted him in the kitchen, my hands shaking, my voice unsteady. He looked at me with cold certainty. "You're not going," he said flatly. "I don't care what some committee thinks. You're not leaving this house." I wanted to scream, to cry, but I couldn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, I told him I'd find another way. He laughed, a short, bitter sound that made me feel like I was a child again. "Girls don't need college. You'll thank me someday." But I didn't thank him. I started making copies of every document I could. I went back to Mrs. Jensen, who helped me file for replacements. I told the scholarship office what was happening, and they assured me they'd hold my spot while I sorted it out. My mother quietly slipped me a copy of my vaccination records she had hidden years earlier, saying she always knew a day like this would come. The summer before college was a battlefield. My father alternated between silent treatment and explosive anger. He would slam doors, mutter insults, sometimes even threaten to cut me off entirely. But I had a plan, and for the first time in my life, I felt a flicker of control. My brothers, who had always walked the line between loyalty to him and quiet sympathy for me, began to shift. They started helping me pack in secret, carrying boxes to a neighbor's garage so he wouldn't notice. When move-in day finally arrived, I felt like I was stepping out of one world and into another. My father refused to come. My mother drove me, her hands tight on the steering wheel, her face pale but determined. As we pulled onto campus, I looked out at the students carrying boxes, parents hugging their kids, laughter echoing across the courtyard. I felt like I was finally breathing air I wasn't supposed to breathe, and it was intoxicating. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the fight. It was only the beginning. The first week of college felt like living in a dream I'd been chasing for years. My dorm room was small, with 2 narrow beds and posters peeling off the walls from past residents, but to me it felt like a palace. My roommate Jasmine was from Chicago. She was confident and outgoing, the kind of person who made friends in an instant. She introduced me to people on our floor, showed me where the best late-night snacks were, and insisted on dragging me to the welcome fair. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who didn't think it was strange for a girl to want an education, but I couldn't completely relax. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt my stomach clench. I knew my father wasn't done. He didn't say goodbye when I left, and silence from him never meant peace. It meant planning. 2 weeks into the semester, I logged into my student portal to check my class schedule, and something was off. A notice flashed across the screen, "Withdrawal request in process." My heart dropped. I hadn't submitted anything. I rushed to the registrar's office where the clerk pulled up my file. "That's strange," she said. "A request was made online under your account." I explained that I hadn't filed it. They froze the request and launched an investigation. IT traced the login back to a suspicious IP address in my hometown. I didn't need them to spell it out. It was him. He had somehow gotten into my account and tried to end my college career before it even began. The university took it seriously. They reset my credentials, added 2-factor authentication, and documented everything. But I walked back to my dorm shaking, tears blurring my vision. Jasmine found me sitting on the floor with my laptop, my hands trembling. When I told her what happened, she wrapped me in a hug. "You're safe here," she said. "We'll figure this out." That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about how far his reach still stretched. Even miles away, even surrounded by new friends and supportive professors, I wasn't free. He was still trying to control me, to drag me back into that cage. The attacks didn't stop there. A month later, my scholarship coordinator called me into her office. She looked uncomfortable, holding a folder of papers. "We received some concerning letters," she said. My chest tightened. She handed them to me. They were typed but signed in my father's name, accusing me of lying on my application, saying I had falsified documents, even claiming I was cheating in my classes. I felt the blood drain from my face. "None of this is true," I whispered. She nodded. "I believe you. We're not taking action on these reports. But I wanted you to know what's being sent." Walking back across campus, the anger boiled in me like fire. It wasn't enough for him to try to stop me from leaving. Now he was trying to destroy my credibility, to rip away the scholarship that was my lifeline. I wanted to scream. Instead, I called my mother. She answered in a hushed voice as if she were hiding. When I told her what was happening, she sighed. "He's getting worse," she said quietly. "He spends all his time digging through your old papers, your school files. He even hired someone, a man who calls himself an investigator." My blood ran cold. "An investigator?" "Yes. He said he wanted proof you didn't deserve to be there. I tried to stop him, but you know how he is." That was the first time I felt genuine fear. Not just anxiety, not just dread, but fear that he might actually find a way to rip this dream away from me. Weeks later, that fear became real. I was walking back from class when I saw him, my father, standing on the edge of campus near the parking lot, his arms crossed, his face set in stone. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. But then he spotted me. His eyes locked on mine, and he started walking toward me. I froze. My heart pounded so loud I couldn't hear anything else. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. He reached me, his voice low and sharp. "You're coming home. Pack your things. This game is over." I found my voice somehow. "No, I'm not going anywhere." His face twisted with rage. For a moment, I thought he might hit me, right there in the middle of campus. Students passing by slowed, watching. He noticed them too. Instead of raising his hand, he raised his voice. "She's a liar," he shouted. "She stole her way in here. She doesn't belong." People stared. Some whispered. My cheeks burned with humiliation. But then Jasmine appeared, running across the grass. "Is everything okay?" she asked loudly, putting herself between us. A security officer noticed the commotion and came over. My father tried to argue, tried to claim I was underage, that he was just retrieving his daughter. The officer checked my student ID, confirmed I was legally an adult, and asked him to leave campus immediately. He stormed off, cursing under his breath, but I knew it wasn't over. If anything, this confrontation had only fueled him more. That night, Jasmine and I sat in the dorm lounge, my hands still trembling. "You need help," she said. "Not just from us. From people who know how to deal with someone like him." She was right. The next morning, I went to the campus legal aid office. They connected me with a pro bono lawyer who specialized in harassment and family law. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. I told my mother about the lawyer. She cried softly on the phone. "I want to help you," she said. "I'm so tired of living like this. Maybe it's time I finally leave him." That sentence lit a spark of hope in me I hadn't felt before. Maybe this wasn't just my fight. Maybe my mother, my brothers, maybe all of us could break free together. Still, the weeks ahead were hard. Every time I checked my email, I half expected another threat, another report, another lie. Every time I walked across campus, I scanned the crowd, wondering if he was lurking. The fear was constant, but so was the determination. I had tasted freedom, and I refused to give it back. By mid-semester, I had stopped expecting peace. Every week seemed to bring a new attempt from him to tear down the life I was building. But something had shifted. I wasn't alone anymore. Each attack didn't just push me down, it pulled others to my side. The university stood with me, my friends rallied around me, and my mother, for the first time in my life, began to stand up too. One night, while I was in the library working on a paper, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. Her voice was shaky but determined. "I left," she said. For a moment, I couldn't process what she meant. You left the house?" "Yes, I packed a bag. Your brothers helped me. We're staying at your aunt's place." I couldn't take it anymore. "He was screaming about you again, saying you were ruining everything." I thought, if I don't go now, I never will. Tears spilled onto my keyboard. I wanted to hug her, to tell her how proud I was, but all I could choke out was, "Mom, you're safe now." Her leaving broke something in him. The calls started. Voicemails filled with rage, threats about how she'd regret it, how I'd regret it too. He filed for custody of my younger brother, even though he was nearly grown, just to pull her back into his orbit. And then came the worst blow yet. A legal notice arrived at the university, claiming I had committed fraud to obtain my scholarship. He wanted an investigation, not just at the school, but at the state level. I took the letter straight to my pro bono lawyer, a sharp, compassionate woman named Rachel. She read it calmly, then looked at me with steady eyes. "He's escalating. But this is also good news in a way. He's putting everything on record now. That means we can fight him in court, and courts don't look kindly on harassment." The thought of facing him in a courtroom made me nauseous. But for the first time, there was a clear path forward. Rachel filed a restraining order on my behalf, citing his attempts to withdraw me, his false reports, and his stalking on campus. At the hearing, he showed up in a rumpled suit, clutching papers and muttering under his breath. When the judge asked him to explain his actions, he launched into a tirade about how women didn't belong in college, how I was disobedient, how the university was corrupting me. The judge's face hardened. "Sir, this is not about your personal beliefs. This is about whether you have harassed and endangered your daughter." My father's rant only dug his hole deeper. The temporary restraining order was granted on the spot. For the first time, I had legal protection. It didn't erase the fear, but it gave me breathing room. Back on campus, life started to feel a little lighter. I could focus more on classes, make more friends, even laugh without constantly looking over my shoulder. But trauma has a way of lingering. At night, I still woke up with my heart racing, convinced I'd hear his footsteps in the hallway. Jasmine would sit with me, sometimes until dawn, reminding me that I was safe. Meanwhile, my brothers were changing too. My oldest brother, David, called me one evening. His voice was quiet, careful, but filled with something new. Anger, not at me, but at our father. "I always thought I had to side with him," he admitted. "But watching Mom finally leave, watching what he's doing to you, I can't ignore it anymore. I want to help. I want to testify if it comes to that." Hearing him say those words felt like years of silence cracking open. For so long, I thought my brothers would never risk defying him. Now, the cracks in his power were spreading. But my father wasn't finished. A few weeks after the restraining order, someone slipped anonymous flyers under doors in my dorm building. The papers accused me of being a liar, a cheater, even of sleeping with professors to get ahead. My hands shook as I picked them up, humiliation washing over me. But this time, instead of crumbling, I marched straight to the dean's office. The dean listened carefully, her face stern. "We take this very seriously," she said. She promised an internal investigation. Within days, they confirmed what I already knew. My father had hired a private investigator to spread the lies. With that evidence, Rachel filed new charges for harassment and defamation. The case against him was growing stronger. My mother, meanwhile, began to rebuild her own life. She enrolled in a certification program at the local community college. For the first time, she had her own bank account, her own phone, her own voice. "You gave me courage," she told me one night. "If you can stand up to him, so can I." Those words hit me hard. For years, I had thought I was just surviving, just clawing for my own future. But now I realized my fight was bigger than me. It was about breaking a cycle that had trapped us all. The court date for the harassment charges was set for the end of spring semester. As finals approached, I felt pulled in two directions, trying to keep my GPA strong while preparing myself to face the man who had controlled my life for so long. Jasmine and my friends became my anchor, dragging me out for coffee when I wanted to hide, reminding me to breathe when panic attacks hit. The night before the trial, I sat alone in my dorm room staring at the ceiling. For once, I wasn't thinking about grades or fear or even victory. I was thinking about freedom. What it would feel like to walk out of that courtroom and know he no longer had power over me. I didn't know then what the verdict would be. But I knew this. No matter what happened, I wasn't that silenced girl anymore. I was stronger. And I wasn't fighting alone. The courthouse smelled of old wood and disinfectant. My hands were clammy as I clutched my notebook, the one I carried everywhere to remind myself I wasn't powerless, that my voice mattered. My lawyer, Rachel, walked beside me with her calm, steady stride. "Remember," she whispered, "you don't have to be perfect. You just have to tell the truth." Let him bury himself with his lies. Inside the courtroom, he was already there. My father. He sat at the defense table, leaning back with his arms crossed, eyes fixed on me like daggers. Seeing him again made my chest tighten. For a moment, I was that small girl again, trembling under his rules and insults. But then I saw my mother sitting behind me, her hands folded, her chin raised with a quiet strength I had never seen before. My brother sat beside her, shoulders squared, no longer afraid to be on my side. That sight pulled me out of the past and anchored me in the present. The charges were serious: harassment, stalking, defamation. The prosecutor laid out the timeline: his attempts to withdraw me from college, the false reports to my scholarship office, his appearances on campus, the flyers, the investigator he'd hired. Each detail was like a stone building the wall of evidence against him. Rachel leaned over during a break and whispered, "He thinks this is still his house, his rules. He doesn't understand that in here it's different. The law doesn't bend to his control." When it was my turn to testify, my legs wobbled as I stood, but my voice came steadier than I expected. I told the court about the missing documents, the hacking, the false reports, the confrontation on campus. My throat tightened when I described the fear, the way I scanned every crowd, the way I lost sleep, the way I carried constant shame and anxiety like a second skin. At one point, his attorney tried to paint me as an ungrateful child who exaggerated. "Isn't it true," she asked, "that your father was simply concerned for your well-being?" I took a deep breath. Concern is making sure your child has enough to eat. Concern is helping them study for exams. Concern is not hacking their college account to erase their future. Concern is not stalking them across campus and screaming at them in front of strangers. That's not concern. That's control. The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge looked up from his notes. When my mother testified, she was nervous at first, but then her words grew firmer. She described the years of silence, the control, the way he had isolated her. And then she said the words I never thought I'd hear in public. He told me once that women don't need education because if they're too smart, they stop obeying. That's when I knew he wasn't protecting us. He was keeping us small. David, my oldest brother, testified too. He admitted how he had stayed quiet for too long, afraid of his wrath, but finally couldn't watch him destroy me. His voice cracked as he said, "My sister deserves better. My mother deserves better. We all deserve better." By the time the defense presented their case, it felt hollow. My father tried to speak on his own behalf, but it came out as a rant. He complained about modern society, about how families were falling apart, about how women were out of control. His words didn't sound like reason. They sounded like obsession. The prosecutor didn't even need to work hard in cross-examination. She simply asked, "So you admit you went to her campus without permission? That you attempted to withdraw her from college? That you sent letters to her scholarship office?" Each time he tried to justify himself, but the admissions stacked higher and higher. I watched the judge's expression grow firmer, the jury's eyes colder. My father couldn't see it. He still thought he was winning. But the truth was, his arrogance was tearing down the last defense he had. When closing arguments came, Rachel's words stayed with me. This is not the story of a father protecting his daughter. This is the story of a man who tried to crush his daughter's future because he couldn't control it. And this is the story of a young woman and a family who found the courage to say enough. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. I sat outside the courtroom with my mother and brothers. My stomach knotted so tight I could barely breathe. Jasmine had come too, sitting with me, rubbing my shoulder as I fought back waves of panic. Every minute felt like an eternity. Finally, the bailiff called us back in. We stood as the jury filed in, their faces unreadable. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might collapse. The foreperson stood, cleared her throat, and read the verdict. On the charge of harassment, guilty. On the charge of stalking, guilty. On the charge of defamation, guilty. My knees almost gave out. My mother grabbed my hand, her tears spilling freely now. My brothers exhaled like they'd been holding their breath for years. Behind us, I heard my father slam his fist on the table, muttering curses under his breath, his face red with fury. But his rage no longer had power here. The judge sentenced him to 18 months in jail, with probation afterward, and barred him from any contact with me or my family. The words washed over me like a storm breaking into sunlight. For the first time, I knew there would be days, weeks, months ahead where I didn't have to look over my shoulder. Walking out of that courtroom, the world felt different, lighter, bigger. The courthouse doors opened to the city outside, cars rushing past, people going about their lives. I took a deep breath of cool air and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. That night, back in my dorm, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I had an exam to study for, a paper to finish. But for the first time, those tasks didn't feel weighed down by fear. They felt like choices, my choices. And I wasn't just studying for myself anymore. I was studying for my mother, who was rebuilding her life, for my brothers who finally broke their silence, for every girl who had ever been told she didn't deserve education. After the sentencing, life didn't magically turn into sunshine and roses. Healing never works that way. It's messy, uneven, and sometimes painfully slow. But it was real, and it was ours. For the first time, we weren't living in fear of his shadow. Back at school, I walked through campus with a different posture. My shoulders weren't hunched anymore. My eyes weren't darting around corners. I could sit under the oak trees by the library and actually relax, knowing he couldn't show up there to humiliate me or threaten me. I still had scars, though. Nights when I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. Mornings when an unknown number on my phone sent me spiraling with panic. Trauma doesn't evaporate. But every day I survived was proof that he no longer owned me. My mother blossomed in ways I never imagined. She rented a small apartment near her sister's house. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, secondhand furniture, thin walls, but it was hers. She enrolled in a bookkeeping certification program, the first step toward her dream of working at a local business. She sent me photos of her textbooks, laughing about how strange it felt to be a student again at her age. "You're the one who gave me this courage," she told me. "If you can face him, so can I." My brothers each found their own paths. David decided to go back to school part-time while working construction. He admitted he'd always felt ashamed for not standing up sooner, but now he wanted to build a better future for himself. My younger brother Matthew joined a community soccer league, something our father would have scoffed at. Watching them carve out their own lives was like seeing doors open in every direction. And me? I poured myself into my classes. I studied harder than ever, not because I had to prove something to him anymore, but because I wanted to prove something to myself. I wanted to show that all the battles, all the tears, all the nights I nearly gave up, none of it was wasted. When I walked across campus, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt like someone who had fought for her place in the world and won. There were moments of joy I never expected. Movie nights in the dorm with Jasmine and our friends. Phone calls with my mom where we laughed instead of whispered. Sundays when my brothers and I met for lunch, no tension hanging over us. These little ordinary joys felt like miracles. The legal aftermath kept unfolding. My father tried to appeal, of course, claiming the system was against him, that we had all lied. But the evidence was too strong. The court denied him. He sat in jail while the rest of us lived in a freedom we had only dreamed about. I sometimes wondered if he ever thought about what he had lost, his family, his power, his illusion of control. But I stopped wasting my energy on those questions. His downfall wasn't my burden anymore. As the months turned into a year, I began to realize something. My story wasn't just about survival. It was about breaking a cycle. Generations before us had lived under silence, under rules that kept women small and voiceless. But now we weren't repeating that. We were rewriting it. The following summer, I was invited to speak at a scholarship event for high school seniors. Standing on that stage, looking out at a crowd of nervous, hopeful faces, I told them the truth. I told them that education isn't just about books and degrees. Sometimes it's about freedom. Sometimes it's the rope you cling to when the world tries to drag you down. And sometimes it's the act of saying, I deserve this, even when people closest to you insist you don't. After the speech, a girl with wide eyes came up to me. She whispered, "My dad doesn't want me to go to college either. But hearing you, I think maybe I can do it." I hugged her tight, my chest swelling with something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Hope. By the time I reached graduation, my mother and brothers were there in the audience, cheering so loudly I could hear them over the roar of the crowd. I walked across the stage, cap and gown swishing, diploma in hand, and I knew that moment wasn't just mine. It belonged to all of us. To my mother who found her courage. To my brothers who broke their silence. To every girl who had ever been told she didn't belong. As I looked out at the crowd, I realized something else. My father's voice, the one that once filled every corner of my life, telling me I couldn't, I shouldn't, I didn't deserve, was silent now. And in that silence, I finally heard my own voice clearly. Strong, steady, free. The cycle was broken. The future was ours.